Hello, my name's Louise Savage of Louise Savage Muses. Welcome back to my channel if you've visited me before, and a very warm welcome if this is the first time that you have tuned in. I'm going to muse today about my reading in July 2023. It's been an absolutely amazing reading month. I can't believe how much reading I've done. I'm not sure why, whether it's because it's the end of term and I'm merged into the summer holidays. I'm not sure. Something in the air. But anyway, I've absolutely loved every minute of it. Actually, that's not quite true, because I've got some quite searing things to say about one or two of the books I've read. But anyway, that's by the by. So I started off the month brilliantly with this novel by Amalie Smith, Threadripper. Not Ripper. I read her novel Marble. She's a Danish author, so this is a beautiful translation. And I read Marble last year, and it was actually my favourite book of the year. I've delayed reading this. I've had it in my possession for a while, but I was really worried that I might be disappointed, but I was not. I think she's fast becoming one of my absolute favourite writers. And that's really exciting because she's still quite young. And I would align her with Max Porter. I think if you like Max Porter, a lot of her prose is really quite fragmentary. I don't know if you can see. And she plays around with sort of time and white space on the page in a similar way. And she's very, very poetic in places. And it's almost like drifting in and out of different consciousnesses. I think that's right. Anyway, Threadripper, it starts off with Penelope, the wife of Odysseus of classical mythology, classical legend. And it starts off with the idea of her weaving her loom and her trick that she plays every night. She unstitches the loom because she's trying to delay the moment when she is going to have to decide which of the unpleasant suitors who have overwhelmed her palace she is going to choose to marry. So it starts off with a kind of cunning, crafty female trick. And through the novel, we kind of weave between Penelope's story. Did you see what I did there with the weaving? And also the story of a young woman in contemporary Denmark who is who's making art by programming a computer to kind of come up with designs that she can then weave and 3D print. And also woven in is the story of Ada Lovelace, which I found fascinating because what Smith does is she makes the connection between weaving and looms, and you know, she makes the point that the initial carding system that was developed in the 1700s in France, was it developed in France or was it developed over here? I can't remember now. It's a while since I read it. That sort of sparked the Industrial Revolution, that actually that works on a system that is very, very similar to computer programming. And so she's kind of, without sort of preaching or anything like that, she's bringing this kind of traditional female sphere of life into the modern world. And she also then makes connections with Ada Lovelace, who was actually probably one of the first, invented the first computer, and who knew it was a woman. And Ada Lovelace, crikey, what a genius, what a brain. She's, you know, I didn't know anything about her, and you come away knowing a lot about her. I didn't know, for example, that she was Byron's daughter. So you've got this wonderful story of this very talented female mathematician in Victorian England, the weaving that's going on in classical Greece, and then in between this fantastic sort of conception of modern weaving. I just absolutely love this, and I'm sure that it's one of the very few books that I will read again. Next up, I read Quicksand Passing by Nella Larson, both of them in this lovely, I love these editions. These books, I've got slightly arthritic fingers these days because I'm getting on, and you know, sometimes I find books a bit heavy to hold or difficult to turn the pages, but I love these editions. They're vintage classics. I just had to check I got that right. So I love the size of them, I love the weight of them. They're very light hold, And the whole experience of reading these books is wonderful. And I loved both of these stories. So Nella Larson was writing, I think, in the 30s. I want to say 1930s. It might have been up earlier than that. What's the... of course, I haven't got my glasses on, have I? When was it first published? Oh, 1920s. So 1928 and 1929. I think she might have only written these two novellas. They are absolutely wonderful. They feel so modern, and both of them confront issues of race and identity. The first is about a young school teacher, black school teacher, and she's really frustrated with the philosophy behind the school that she's teaching in, so she leaves. She goes and sort of tries to go and live with her father. That doesn't work out. She ends up in poverty in Harlem, and you know, the descriptions of her life, of those different experiences. She also goes to Copenhagen. There's an interesting link with Amalie Smith, the Denmark link. Yeah, I just loved it. I loved Helga's character in that novel. And then the second one, Passing, is about a friendship that rejuvenates. Now, if you read and enjoyed The Vanishing Half by Brit, whatever she's called, I'm just glancing, can't see it up there. That was shortlisted for the Women's Prize a few years ago. I think if you liked that book, you would really enjoy The Passing, because it is a similar idea. It's two friends, one of whom has passed as white, one of whom has not, and they reconnect. They've sort of, you know, they knew each other from school. They bump into each other years and years and years later, and it's how their lives kind of interweave. So I found that very interesting, very readable, very fresh. Next up, now, I was really excited. I bought Madwoman when I was on a wonderful Books in My Bag tour with Simon Savage and my son up in North Yorkshire. And this book by Louise Tregar sounds amazing. It's the story of Nellie Bly, who was a real, you know, it's a true story. She was a journalist, you know, right at the early days of female journalism, working in New York. And she decides to pass herself off as a madwoman because there is this awful prison island. Well, it's not a prison, it's an institution for women who are deemed mad. Of course, a lot of them aren't. And it has all the makings of an absolutely sensational story. Why she didn't write it as non-fiction, I don't know, because she'd obviously done loads of research. But I just thought I thought it was really badly written. I'm sorry, but that's how I felt. You know, a lot of the language was poor, and it was sort of stereotypical. I mean, you know, lots of showing rather than telling, ramming research down my throat. I got really frustrated because the only reason I finished it, I think, was because the story is so compelling, but it felt like a rush job to me, and that's probably really unfair. But yeah, I was very, I was mad. I was a mad woman by the time I got to the end of this book. Write it as non-fiction if you're going to fill it full of facts and data and... Ugh. Anyway, there we go. And then a really pleasant surprise. I know a lot of people have been banging on about this book. Rumaan Alam, Leave the World Behind. I had absolutely no expectations of this, but I did read the first few pages, and contrary to the previous book I've just mentioned, I thought it was very well written. And the premise is really good. So it's about again, it's set in America. It's about a couple who are on holiday with their two young children, and they've rented someone's very swish house for several weeks, and they've really been looking forward to this holiday, and they get there and it starts off okay, but then there's this one, I can't remember if it's a morning, I think it's in the morning or afternoon, but there's this tremendous bang. Something's not right. The power goes, they lose signal, and these two, a black couple, elderly black couple, turn up on their doorstep, who are actually the owners of the house, and they are kind of taking refuge because something dreadful has happened. Now, you never quite find out what the something dreadful is, but the implication is that the world is going to kind of, you know, come to an end. And the novel develops this relationship between the couple who own the house and the family who are renting it from them. And I just love the tension, the dynamic between, or the lack of, between some of these characters, the children's take on it all. And there are some descriptions towards the end of the novel that are really quite very cleverly thought through and written. So I've got to be careful because I don't want to give out any spoilers, but I did find this novel a really interesting and thought-provoking read. So I'm a bit distracted because there's a pigeon creeping on next door's roof. I'm not quite sure what it's doing, so I'm right old peck. Anyway, there we go. Then I read Jong Born 1982 by Cho Nam Joo. Again, this is a book that I've had knocking around a while and been very tempted by a few times. 1982, very important year because that was the year that my first child, Simon Savage, was born. I thought I'd better drop it in there. Oh, this is such a poignant book. It really makes you think. It's set in Seoul, in Korea. It's the story of this woman who's in her early 30s by the time the story opens, and then you come kind of unwind, you go back into her past. And basically she's just kind of disintegrating as the novel progresses. She kind of disintegrates more and more, and the story is told in such a matter-of-fact, very what's the word, very plain prose style, which just enhances the tragedy. It's beautifully done, and you know, it centers around you know, the fact that she's become a mother, and the implications of being a woman in that society and how difficult that can be. She's got a very attentive husband, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's happy. She doesn't really have her own persona in the views of society or anybody she mixes with. And what I thought was particularly well done in this novel was her relationship with her in-laws. You know, again, society's expectations of what she should be like as a daughter-in-law, and the sense of kind of one-way traffic all the time, that she seems to be the one who's always compromising, and never quite meets a standard. I found this, again, a really, really fascinating read. And what a fantastic cover. You know, the anonymity there and the different sort of roles that she has to take in society. This was a massive surprise. This is a book that I've had on my shelf probably for years. The Tusk That Did the Damage. There's something about the cover that didn't appeal to me, and I didn't realise until I looked at it really carefully that actually there's this beautiful elephant. And this is a very unusual novel, and I absolutely loved it. So this is the story of an elephant called Gravedigger. He's a very young elephant, but unfortunately he gets a reputation for killing. And he's called Gravedigger because when he kills humans, he then covers them in this very shallow grave. So we tap into his story because the protagonist, Emma, is a young aspiring filmmaker. She's out in Africa with... no, sorry, it's in Kerala in India. Why did I say Africa? Elephants, I suppose. That's where I went to see them. So she's in Kerala in India, and she's making a documentary at a kind of elephant sanctuary. A very sort of, it's supposed to be very sort of no holds barred, interrogative documentary. I can't get my words out today. With a friend of hers who she's known for a long time. And it's a really interesting novel because it looks at, you know, how do you ever know the truth of a situation? It looks at the way one culture can manipulate another. It looks at the way that we view the world through stereotypes. Again, interesting relationships in here. And particularly there's a young boy called, I think he's called Manu, who gets involved with the elephant, and watching his sort of character develop. He's got a really unpleasant brother who sort of drags him into all sorts of trouble. So yeah, this is by Tania James. I don't know whether she's written anything else, but I shall certainly be trying to find out, because I thought this was unusual subject matter. I hadn't read about this before, and yeah, I really got totally absorbed in it. Read it very quickly. Next up, Kaikeyi. I bought this not very long ago. I can't quite remember whether that was on the... It might have been when I was down in London for the Women's Prize. I'm not sure. Now, this was sold to me partly because of the cover, I can't lie. I really love that sort of silhouette. I love anything that's to do with India in fiction, and I'm desperate to go there as a country. It's a country I've never visited. And somewhere on the blurb on this, it says, you know, if you like Circe by Madeline Miller, you will definitely love this book. I had a bit of a troubled relationship with this book. So it's the story of Kaikeyi, who is a female princess. She's got divine powers, although she doesn't realise that until a little way into the novel. She's a character from the Ramayana, which of course is an Indian legend, epic poem. And I did not know anything about it. And so one of the reasons that I bought this was because I thought, you know, there's been a lot of classical Greek, Roman myth retellings, which I've fully flung myself into. How wonderful that that's spreading to other forms of mythology. So I was really interested with this. I did enjoy it, but I felt it was just really overlong. At points it became a little bit tedious. In some ways, you know, I could understand that the character needed to be built up. And I thought, again, that this is another novel that suffered from I didn't think the editing was careful enough. You know, occasionally there were sentences that were just really poor. I don't know if I've turned a corner down there. I'm just going to, where are my glasses? Just going to have a quick look and see whether I'd actually, get them on my face. Yeah, do you think we will make it in time? Barata asked as we made camp the first evening of our journey. It was the most time I had spent with him in some time. I mean, I don't know, for I'd only seen him at meals or passed him in the halls in the tumult since my arrival. It's, you know, there were moments of weak editing, and I think that's a real shame, because the potential of this novel was really good, and I like a good chunky book, and I enjoyed the characters, but yeah, it just felt that little bit hackneyed in places. Big shame, but you know, I do feel I know an awful lot about the mythology as a result of reading this. And then finally, and I read this in 2 sittings, I bought this last weekend when I was up in the Wirral with Simon Savage, my son, and this just really appealed to me. So it's The Schoolhouse by Sophie Ward, and it's a thriller. It really, I couldn't put it down. It tells the story from various different perspectives, but basically it's about 2 cases of missing young girls. One case from sort of, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. Is it 1984? No, 1975. And then I think a more recent case in 2015. It's fiction. I really enjoyed the character of the detective. It's a lesbian detective, and I really enjoyed the sort of discussion of how difficult it was for her to be, you know, to reveal her true self in her work environment. I enjoyed the page-turneriness of it. There were some really good twists and turns in the story. I enjoyed the character of the girl who, now what's her name? I read it so quickly. Isabel, that's right. I really enjoyed the character of Isabel, who is deaf, and her deafness is the result of a terrible accident in inverted commas. And again, the main mystery centres around her and her gradual unraveling of the past. She has misunderstood her past, and as a reader you're trying to kind of unstitch that alongside her. Oh, there's a wonderful scene near the beginning in the library. Isabel works in a library and these two young girls are in the library, and she just knows there's something wrong. She knows there's something not right. And the way that that is explained and then riffed on through the novel is really clever. So I thought this was very slick. I certainly would read something by Sophie Ward again. Both of the stories, both disappearances, the one that's happening, you know, the contemporary one, and the one that Isabel was involved in the past, are really, really engaging, interesting stories. It focuses also on the idea of Montessori schools, so schools where there aren't really many rules, and you know, it raises questions about education. You know, is that education? Is children being allowed to choose and children playing? Is that true education? And of course, I really enjoyed that, even though on my summer holidays, found that really fascinating. So yeah, it's been an absolutely superb reading month this July. I've really enjoyed it. Even the books that I've been a bit critical of, I'm still really glad I've read them. So there we are. So happy reading this summer. Wonder what August will bring. I'm not convinced I'm going to get many books read this August because I'm off on adventures for a few weeks, and I think that's going to be really full on. But you never know what I might manage to read on the plane, etc. So yeah, hopefully I'll have lots to chat about this time next month. Take care, everybody. Bye.